All right. So we're now joined with Megan Jaworski, and it's a privilege to have you with us, Megan. Thank you so much for joining us. Megan's been involved in a lot of different service since. How old were you when you got involved in this kind of activity, Megan?
I think I was 14 years old.
Yeah. And so I'm very curious about what you, over your lifetime, have learned about giving, what it means to give, how you've served, and so we want to pick your experience about that. Firstly, just tell us, what does service mean to you?
Okay, service to me means giving of yourself with whatever it is that God might have given you, resources, your skills, your time, and giving it to someone who actually has a need for that without expecting anything in return.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how have you implemented that in your life over the course of, since you're 14 years old?
Okay, how much time do we have? No, all right, I'll speak quickly. So I volunteered and lived in Zambia, where I was teaching with teaching children who were HIV positive and orphaned in the poorest community in the capital of Zambia.
So you did this once you'd finished high school?
Yeah.
And how long did you spend doing that?
I was there for nearly 4 months. Yeah, so I was there and doing some teacher training as well and teaching the children. And I saw some children die in that time of AIDS, which is, I guess, what cemented my passion. Then when I was in high school, I did a few service trips in high school, but I guess this trip to Zambia was what impacted me the most. And then I've been to India 3 times. I've lived in a community with children whose parents have leprosy, and I worked with lepers, and my husband and I, we lived with them, and I helped establish a school there for the lepers. I've worked with girls who've been trafficked in India, orphans in rural communities of India as well. And then I went to Zimbabwe with my husband, and there I met a group of students, children, and they all lived on the streets, and they'd just been housed, and there were about 14 of them, and I asked them, what do you want in life? And they all said, I want to go to school, because none were going to school. So I made a promise to them that I would set up a school for you, and that's exactly what I did. While I was living there for 4 months, I researched curriculums, established a school, employed 2 teachers, and then I flew back to Australia, and my husband and I registered a charity, and now...
That's the Edge Foundation?
Yeah, the Edge Foundation, so edgefoundation.org.au, I'd throw that in. So then we started that foundation, and 4 years later we now have over 40 children in 2 schools, and God's provided. We've purchased a building and we're doing that. But I was also the Victorian advocacy leader for the Oak Tree Foundation as well, which is Australia's only youth-run aid and development organisation. And I met with politicians to discuss aid, trade and fair practices. And I also ran workshops in schools on social justice issues and organised the largest free-to-air concert in Australian history to raise awareness about poverty.
So you have done all of that, right?
Yeah.
Which, when you say it together like that, devalues each part of it, because each one of those things on its own is quite huge.
Oh, yeah.
Here's my question for you. What triggered that for you? What started your involvement, and what gave you this heart to serve in such a sacrificial way, really?
Well, when I was 6 years old, there was a famine in Ethiopia in the 80s, and I remember seeing the kids dying of starvation, and then I remembered looking around us and people were dying of obesity, and I just said to my parents, this is wrong, and I just said to them, this is it, I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to change the world. My parents, yes, Megan, so nice of you, 6 years old. So honestly, Brian, I can't really answer that question because I've always had it in me. I've always seen how the other world lives, and I've always believed that God has blessed me with much as my responsibility to give it to others. It's what Christ has called us to do, to be his hands and feet.
So you're doing all of these things overseas, and it's just fantastic. how do you serve locally? So what is your mission in your day-to-day life here in your local community?
Yeah, I just believe that we need to be the light in the darkness, and there's darkness all around the world, and it doesn't matter where you are, there's darkness. And so I have made friends with a refugee family in a detention centre in Melbourne called MITA, and I went and I visited them, and they came over from Iran and on a boat, and they've been at Christmas Island and at a few other detention centres around Australia, and they were actually fleeing for religious persecution reasons. So they didn't agree with the strict Islamic government, and I gave them the book Steps to Christ, and now they actually call themselves Christian, yet they're originally Muslim, and it's because a group of Christians have befriended refugees in detention centres and reach them where they're at and show them love, to show them that not all Australians dislike them. We actually want to be Christ-like here on this earth. So I do that. I sign petitions.
As young Australians.
Yes.
And you know that we are very excited to become, and just to serve, that's what this day is about. So how do you suggest that we go about doing that? You've seen a lot of service projects in your life. What do you think is a good way to become involved with service?
Either overseas or locally.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have really good hearts, but they don't necessarily do the right thing by the people they're serving.
Right.
So for
what do
me,
you mean by that?
Okay, my passion is to see people's needs here met. People's skills here met with a need wherever they're serving. So, for example, my skill is teaching. So, recently I went on a mission trip to Vanuatu, and it was a building trip, and I didn't feel like I was utilising my skills, and it went against my own ethical beliefs. So then I found the local school, and I said, hey, can I do some teacher training and teach English? And they were like, yes. So I did that, and the outcome was fantastic. People really benefit. So I think the important thing is, first of all, you've got to look to see if what you're doing is empowering the person you're helping. Because empowerment's really important. We're not white knight in shining armour people coming in saying, look what I know, you don't know this. So it's about empowering them. It also has to be sustainable. So if you're going in there and just hammering a few hammers, but you don't teach the locals how to do it, or you don't partner with them, I don't believe that is a sustainable approach, and it's not long lasting, and it's also not empowering. So it needs to be empowering, it needs to be sustainable, and it needs to feel a need that they have. So, for example, an aid organisation came in, gave all these clothes to a community in Zambia who were currently working the land that the government gave them. They stopped working the land because they had the clothes and the food that they needed because it was given to them, and the crops all died. The Zambian government came and said, why the crops died? And they said, well, because we got given what we needed. So for me, I'm very passionate about empowering people and seeing how can we help them long term.
Well, one of the ways that you've empowered was actually through one of your recent trips to Africa. You remember Dana, you went with her, and she has written a song about her experience there and service. And so she's recorded that for us from Avondale College. So we're going to have a look at that now. So let's have a look.
This is a surprise.
Yeah, let's have a look from Dana.